Let's talk about post-processing and what you do with your images in post-processing. This is something that I tend to think a lot about when I actually do photography, is what I'm going to do with it afterwards. So I'm looking through the viewfinder, I'm going, well, this is going to be a black and white. It's so damn colorful and so contrasty that maybe it's not going to look too much like a postcard. Maybe I'm going to change it around a little bit. You were obviously at one point a darkroom guy. Made your own prints and so forth. So walk me through some of the evolution of where you've been and where you are today, and what tools you use today to accomplish, getting that final print and final image.
Well, I started out using Cibachrome paper, and when it first came out, and got to be okay at it, but not really good at it. And at a certain point, I wasn't happy with the printings. The prints I was coming up with. I wasn't able to develop the skill because I didn't have the darkroom to do it in. So I for about 10 years, I used labs and would work with a printer and go back and forth with them and getting the best print out of it. And that worked okay, but as soon as Photoshop came along, that made a big difference. I started to learn how to manage contrast, how to bring out nuances in photographs that I never could before. And a lot of the books I've had published were published before I really had any control over the images. They basically scanned the film and it went off to Hong Kong, wherever, and I get a proof back straight from the film with no Photoshop. And it's evolved so that I've developed enough skill to do local masking, and I'm not a high-tech Photoshop user, but really have been able to bring a lot of older photographs as well as new ones to life through scanning my 4x5s on a drum scanner and working on them in Photoshop.
Your equipment today consists of what, computer-wise, and what? Tell me what your workroom consists of.
I have a Mac Pro, the latest little
trash
round thing guy, and it's working fine. And I had an older computer and it was time to upgrade. The larger files, especially 4x5 files, are start off the scans 300 megabytes, so takes a little computer power to process that. So it's been nice to have that speed. I have an Apple monitor, calibrated monitor, nothing super fancy there. I back up my work on a Drobo. I've used a RAID system for quite a while, and it's gotten dated and old, and they're not working. So I need to upgrade to a more robust backup system.
You told me about an issue where your home was threatened by a fire at one time, and of course, obviously, one of the things that all of us think about right away is when we're threatened by fires. Used to say grab the family album or the wedding album or something, but what do you do about backup? I would be so concerned with backups. I still am. I think I have a pretty good workflow, but how do you handle making sure that all your work and what your lifetime of work is safe? Do you have a process that you want to share?
I have a safe deposit box full of hard drives.
Okay.
That's the main thing. So I have a off-site location.
What is your raw processor choice? You're working with Lightroom or do you work through Photoshop?
I'm working with Lightroom.
Okay.
I'm happy with Lightroom. It helps me stay organized and helps me plan out themes. Like if I have a project for a client, I have a collection, and enables me to work much more quickly with all the images I have to deal with.
With Lightroom, and you say it's keeping you organized, and you do your projects and so forth with collections. How do you use keywording? This is something that a lot of people got into, found it's too much trouble. Do you keyword everything?
I have dropped the ball on that. For a long time when I was doing more stock photography and that was more, had higher potential as an outlet for my images, I had a a system through my stock management program called InView Stock View, and it had a keywording system, and it was pretty elaborate. Actually, I had an assistant who helped me do that. Now I just toss a few words in there, and
So
I
you'd
can
be
still
happy,
find things pretty easily in Lightroom, though.
you'd be happy with just putting like Yosemite or the location or something very basic. And
Yeah, it's something that I always thought was important to do, and it hasn't shown up as a need. I'm not doing that much stock photography, and they're not going to stock agencies, and they would be adding keywords themselves anyway. So it's minimal. So yeah, just basic. There might be a total of a season if it's spring, and a color if there's a color, and a location. 10 keywords maybe.
so in this process, we have now worked through Lightroom. You got your images, you've manipulated them. Most likely you've gone somewhere into Photoshop to do any finality to them, spotting or something. What happens next? How do you print? What are you doing? Are you printing?
Yeah, I make my own prints, and I have Canon printers, and I will usually start in Lightroom. Before Lightroom came along, I went straight through Photoshop. Now, as Lightroom's evolved, I've done a lot of my global adjustments in Lightroom, and then when it's ready to polish up before printing, I'll work, as you said, in Photoshop. Any local maskings I didn't really do in Lightroom, or prefer the methods that I'm familiar with in Photoshop. Yep. I'll work there, and then I work with a mastered layer file in Photoshop and save that. And then when I print, I size, and I have a sharpening action that I use that works well, and then size it, sharpen it, save it, print it.
So you sharpen for output, and so so in a sense, let's say you have a shot of half dome, and it's full size, and you finish it up, and it's layered. Now you take that, you flatten it, and you size it, and then you sharpen for output.
Size.
Based on the size. And you output through Photoshop, or do you use a RIP?
I use a plugin that Canon has that goes through Photoshop, that takes me to the printing plugin. It's not Photoshop's plugin. It's through Canon.
Okay, so it's a Canon.
It has a good proofing system, and I have the profiles they make these days are excellent, so I can pretty much get what I want.
Speaking of profiles, you started early on in profiles with our friend Bill Atkinson, didn't you?
Yeah, I had my first printer was an Epson 7600, and it was about the same time Bill was developing his profiles for the Epson. And like everybody else, I went to the canned profiles and wondered how I could be so stupid and not make the print come out like I saw it. And then I realized it wasn't me, thankfully. And Bill shared his profiles with me, and it was before they made it onto Epson's site, before they incorporated it, and it just made all the difference. It saved a lot of money. It didn't have to make so many prints. You got what you expected to get.
Well, Bill was a genius there, and apparently, I remember him telling me he was colorblind, so everything he did in regards to color management was quantitative. And I kind of hear that's something like the way you do it too. Is that correct? Or
well, I haven't had an official test for color blindness, but that I've done some tests online, and I've had people tell me, my prints have a certain cast to me long ago when I first started printing, and so I just discovered I had some red-green color blindness. So I have people I check with, as in my wife.
yeah.
You see any problem with this, dear? And so and this one great thing about the profiles is that I don't have anybody making those comments anymore, and it's what I see is what I get.
Well, the prints that you have on display are absolutely gorgeous, and they're beautiful. So you obviously have got that mastered.
One thing I could talk about just real quickly is, and you saw a photograph of the poster of the redbud and the Merced River.
Yeah.
And that is a fairly elaborate Photoshop image. And we were talking about local masking yesterday. So there's the color range tool on an image like that works great. There were green leaves that had backlight, wonderful veins in them. And I could see that in the capture and wanted to emphasize it when it came to a print. So I selected that green and did a mask just for the leaves and tweaked the contrast. So very subtle change, but if you're standing, a normal viewing distance, you can actually read the texture, the veins of the leaves. So I would do that on other images, say dogwood blossoms, or especially helpful when there's a multitude of that one color scattered around the image. It's easy if it's a one place area. You can do a local mask in various ways, selections or painting or whatever.
Moving out of our realm of what we do every day, like landscape photography, I got to pick on you for a minute because it was kind of funny. I was out a lot of times when we're shooting some of these things. I would get the old iPhone out and take a shot so I could send it somewhere. And then last night you wanted to show me some things you were doing on the iPhone. And what I was encouraged by is the fact that you're not just, disciplined and boxed in by the camera gear that you normally work with, and this real tight philosophy. This is the only thing I'm going to shoot. You actually went and you showed me, and I know you're working with other projects too, but you took the iPhone and you just spent some time in the flower department at the grocery store. Probably didn't buy any flowers either, did you? I
didn't. I have to admit, I swiped the image and ran.
But it's pretty interesting to see that you still have that playfulness. That you're willing to pull something out and play with it, approach something that's not your comfort zone, that's not your everyday area, and enjoy, seeing what you can pull out of it.
In a way, it is my comfort zone, though, because seeing the beauty around me is what keeps me going. So there's one photograph that I was at a grocery store, and I was walking out the door, and the flowers were right there, and I had groceries in one hand and the iPhone in the other hand. And I took the picture, and just because I thought it was beautiful, no other reason at all, no idea what I might do with it. And so I tried playing with it on my iPad and put it into Snapseed and tweaked it around and put some borders on it. And at that same time, I was signing a poster contract with a new publisher, and I was showing him images. And so it probably isn't an image I would show in a gallery, but I would, there are different segments, branches of my business, and posters has been one of them. And that was something that I enjoyed taking. I enjoyed working with in the processing. And I showed it to him, and he said, "We're going to publish that." And so I said, "Really? Okay."
It's a surprise.
All right. And that took me to the grocery store again, and I photographed some similar flowers and processed it in a similar way. And they wanted it's commercially driven, but it expands your creative process into realms. Maybe some people would sneer at it, maybe not, but I'm not afraid of that. And so that's a commercial venue. It's a beautiful subject, and I like it for what I did, and I'm happy to responding to a client can drive you in directions you just wouldn't otherwise go. Ansel Adams always started out his lectures by saying, "I was a commercial photographer for 60 years," and he was saying, "I'm proud of that." And he talked about his assignments and how they helped develop his craft and his vision and his ability to compose. And so I took heart to that and said, well, I have a main segment of my work that's intimate landscapes, but why not try other directions? And as we talked about earlier, it keeps me invigorated creatively. So that's important.
Where's William Neill going in the future? What do you see the next few years in regards to your work and what you've got planned? Anything you want to share with us that way?
Well, I've largely focused on doing something with what I have. And so I always have ideas for projects. I haven't done a book for a long time, and so I'm working in that direction. Hopefully that'll work out. I have a publisher that's interested in a retrospective, so that's kind of a thrilling thought.
Oh, that's a cool thought, yes.
And we'll see where that leads. And I still continue to do my own publishing in terms of ebooks. I have 4 of them in existence now, and hope to do more. The next one, hopefully, will be my Antarctic work from our trip in January.
I have to compliment you. It was. I remember my first conversation with you in regards to coming to Antarctica. We invited you to come to Antarctica. It was like, you were so funny. It was like, wow. You talk about maybe pulling somebody out of their comfort zone, and and of course we had numerous conversations along the way prior to the trip. What did you come away with from that trip? I mean, if you described that whole experience, it was someplace you've never been, and you've been a lot of places.
Well, it was a stupendous place on a scale I hadn't experienced before. I've been to the Himalayas. I've flown over Everest. I've watched lava flowing into the ocean, which is a remarkable experience, but it just didn't end. If you had one day and there was all these glaciers and it was beautiful and you photographed it, and then a few hours later you're in another place that's equally stupendous, and it was hard to catch your breath. So I just rolled with it. I've done some wildlife photography, some travel type photography, and so I had to get up to speed real quick on motion photography, because you're in a zodiac. It's never completely still. You have to very literally go with the flow while the boat's moving, while the zodiac's
Yes,
moving.
it is a little different.
You have to anticipate something's coming. That if you're on a tripod, you can arrange your spaces and place things, by choosing your camera position, and all of a sudden you don't have control of your camera position. It shakes you up in a good way, and I was very thrilled to be doing it, but I was pleased with how I was able to handle it.
Well, I think you should be pleased with some of the work that you shared with me. Once again, maybe you're setting the bar a little higher. I know you've got some 5 stars out of that trip.
A few, I think, more than I would have ever guessed.